Hello! Today we explore a topic of importance to every one of us, the environment. Our discussion is guided by the insights of Peter Singer, who brings a profound ethical perspective to environmental issues. Singer's work challenges us to rethink our relationship with the natural world, delving into the philosophies that shape Western attitudes toward nature. We will begin with an examination of Western traditions. This historical context sets the stage for understanding the entrenched attitudes that have influenced modern environmental policy. Next, we turn to the ethical implications for future generations. Singer emphasizes the irreversible impacts of environmental degradation, urging us to consider the long-term consequences of our actions on those who will inherit the earth. This segment will address the moral imperative to preserve our natural heritage for posterity. We will also tackle the complex question of intrinsic value beyond sentient beings, exploring whether non-human entities like animals and ecosystems possess inherent worth independent of human interests. Our journey concludes with a discussion on deep ecology and developing a comprehensive environmental ethic. Here, Singer advocates for an inclusive approach that respects all forms of life, urging a shift from exploitation to stewardship. Stay with us as we delve into these critical issues, aiming to broaden our understanding and inspire responsible action towards our environment. Let us begin with the Western traditions. Western attitudes to nature blend Hebrew beliefs from the Bible with ancient Greek philosophy, especially Aristotle's. Both traditions place humans at the moral center. Genesis in the Bible grants humans dominion over nature, interpreted by some modern Christians as stewardship, though the text supports a more domineering role. Early Christian thinkers like Paul and Augustine viewed nature's purpose as serving humans. This view was reinforced by Aristotle and later by Thomas Aquinas, who aligned with Christian theology with Aristotle's hierarchy, where animals and plants exist for human use. For most of Christian history, the mainstream belief was that the natural world has no intrinsic value and exists solely for human benefit. Destruction of nature was not seen as sinful unless it harmed humans. This harsh view does not preclude concern for nature if it affects human well-being. Arguments against activities like burning fossil fuels or deforestation can be made within this human-centered ethic due to their adverse impact on human health and climate. The concept of wilderness has shifted from wasteland to valuable islands amid human activity, increasing its scarcity value and providing a strong argument for preservation, even from a human-centered perspective. This perspective gains strength when considering long-term environmental impacts, emphasizing the need for sustainable practices to protect human welfare.
A virgin forest represents millions of years of natural development. Once destroyed, whether by logging or flooding for dams, the forest's unique ecological continuity is irreparably broken. Short-term gains from such actions, jobs, profits, and cheaper products are fleeting, while the long-term loss affects all future generations. Environmentalists advocate viewing wilderness as a world heritage that must be preserved for descendants, emphasizing long-term values that our culture often overlooks. Economists' practice of applying a discount rate to future benefits devalues long-term environmental preservation. For instance, Preserving a forest for its future worth is overshadowed by short-term profits due to the discount rate's compounding effect. While it is uncertain if future generations will value wilderness, current trends shows increasing appreciation, especially in developed nations. Wilderness offers immense beauty, scientific potential, and recreational opportunities. The aesthetic value of nature often surpasses that of renowned art, providing profound, almost spiritual experiences. Preserving wilderness ensures that future generations retain the choice to experience unspoiled nature, just as we preserve historic cities regardless of future interest. We must prevent irreversible losses like those past generations inflicted by causing species extinctions. Addressing climate change is crucial, as human influence has already diminished the concept of true wilderness. Despite this, significant natural areas remain worth saving. A human-centered ethic can support environmental preservation, but we must also challenge traditional Western views to fully address environmental issues, acknowledging the intrinsic value of nature beyond human utility.
Debates on environmental issues often focus on human interest, but serious discussions must address intrinsic value. It's arbitrary to claim only humans have intrinsic value. Non-human experiences also hold value. Intrinsic value is something desirable in itself, unlike instrumental value, which is means to an end. Human happiness is intrinsically valuable, while money is instrumentally valuable. When considering damming a river, focusing solely on human interests weighs economic benefits against the loss to bushwalkers, scientists, and future generations. This calculation already shows significant long-term cost. Expanding this perspective to include non-human interests further tips the balance against building the dam. Animals in the flooded area will die either by drowning or starvation, causing immense suffering. Their deaths resulting in the loss of future experiences should be given significant weight. The death of human animals, though seen as less significant than human deaths due to differences in foresight and planning, still matters. Utilitarians consider the loss of future existence and experiences for animals. If a dam floods a valley, it kills thousands if not millions of sentient beings, which is a major consideration in cost-benefit analysis. Moreover, the ongoing loss of habitat means animals would have lived there for thousands of years lose their future pleasures and pains. Even though calculating benefits becomes complex, this loss should not be dismissed. The potential disappearance of species and ancient trees and ecosystems destruction raise further ethical concerns. This leads to a fundamental moral question: should ethics extend beyond sentient beings to include the intrinsic value of species, trees, and ecosystems independent of human interest?
Reverence for life. The ethical position developed in this book extends but remains within the dominant Western tradition. It focuses on all sentient creatures, leaving other living things outside of moral consideration. Drowning ancient forests or losing species are only relevant if they affect sentient beings. Extending ethics beyond sentient beings is challenging, since the interests of non-sentient creatures lack conscious experience. Sentient creatures have wants and desires, making their interests easier to consider morally. However, plants and other non-sentient beings do not experience conscious states. Determining value for non-sentient beings like trees is complex without considering sentient interests. We know what benefits plants: water, sunlight, compost, and what harms them: extreme temperatures. Yet, assessing the relative importance of different life forms like ancient trees versus grass tussocks is difficult without subjective interests. Albert Schweitzer ethic of reverence for life extends moral consideration to all living beings, advocating for an inherent respect for life. Schweitzer argued that recognizing our will to live, we should revere all life, seeing value in every living entity. This suggests that it is ethical to protect all forms of life and avoid harming anything living, seeing life itself as sacred. Paul Taylor echoed this in his book, Respect for Nature, asserting that every living thing pursues its own good, deserving the same value we place on our own existence. Both Schweitzer and Taylor use metaphorical language to describe plants and non-sentient beings' drive to live. But they mistake this metaphor for literal truth. Plants lacking consciousness do not experience yearning, pleasure, or terror. Holmes Ralston criticized comparing plants' seeking behavior to that of a guided missile. He argued that natural selection creates valuing organisms even without sentience. However, this view conflates biological processes with conscious valuing. Machines designed to seek energy do not value it consciously. Similarly, plants' genetically driven behavior does not imply sentient valuing. Therefore, there is no clear reason to revere living processes over non-living ones. This perspective questions why we should have greater reverence for trees than for stalactites, or for single-celled organisms than for mountains.
We delve into the concept of deep ecology, a profound perspective on environmental ethics. More than 60 years ago, ecologist Aldo Leopold called for a new ethic to address humanity's relationship with the land and its inhabitants. His land ethic extended community boundaries to include soils, waters, plants, and animals. This idea gained momentum in the 1970s with the rise of ecological awareness. Norwegian philosopher Arnes distinguished between shallow and deep ecological thinking. Shallow ecology focuses on human benefits like clean water and recreational wilderness. In contrast, deep ecology values the biosphere's integrity for its own sake regardless of human advantage. Several theorists have since developed deep ecological theories. Leopold's principle states, a thing is right when it preserves the biotic community's integrity, stability, and beauty. Wrong when it does otherwise. Ness and George Sessions outlined principles of deep ecology, emphasizing the intrinsic value of all life, human and non-human, and the richness and diversity of life forms as inherent values. Humans, they argue, have no right to diminish this richness except to meet vital needs. Australian philosophers Richard Sylvan and Val Plumwood extended these principles to include non-living and natural objects. They argue that natural objects and systems deserve preservation unless there is a compelling reason otherwise. Freya Matthews and Lawrence Johnson suggest that ecosystem and species have their own interests and intrinsic values. They propose that these entities, like individual organisms, strive for self-realization, which grants them moral significance. However, critics argue that attributing intrinsic value to non-sentient entities like ecosystems and species is problematic. They contend that moral significance is clearer when considering sentient beings who experience satisfaction and suffering. Despite these debates, the case for preserving wilderness remains strong. Arguments based on the interests of sentient beings, both present and future, are sufficient to advocate for protecting significant wilderness areas over economic exploitation. This perspective ensures the preservation of nature for future generations.
An environmental ethic considers the interests of all sentient creatures, including future generations, and foster an appreciation for unspoiled nature. It discourages large families contrasting with outdated ethical beliefs from less populated times, and rejects materialist ideals measure success by personal development and fulfillment. This ethic promotes frugality and reuse to minimize environmental impact, advocating for recycling and environmentally friendly products. It reassesses extravagance, viewing rainforest timber, disposable paper, motorsports, and a beef as wasteful. Emphasizing frugality does not mean rejecting pleasure but valuing non-consumptive joys from relationship, nature, and creative activities, ensuring harmony with the environment.
Corporations are often blamed for environmental damage. This has created a need for integrating business perspectives into environmental ethics and raising corporate awareness. One example is Starcast Incorporated, which faced protests over dolphins dying in tuna nets. Initially, they ignored the protests due to cost concerns and legality. Declining sales led them to change their nets to avoid losing profits, showing a typical corporate approach where duties are driven by economic reasons. To ensure corporations act responsibly towards the environment, it's essential to view this duty as an ethical obligation based on moral principles. Number 1. Moral rights. Corporations should conserve resources for future generations' equal rights to limited resources. Number 2 is justice. Corporations should leave the world no worse than they found it. And last, number 3, utility. Corporations should maximize beneficial future outcomes and minimize harmful ones. Without these ethical considerations, legal and economic factors alone are insufficient for genuine environmental responsibility.
As we conclude our in-depth exploration of the environment through the lens of Peter Singer's profound insights, we recognize the urgency and complexity of the challenges before us. Singer's examination of Western traditions reveals how historical views have shaped our current environmental policies, often prioritizing human interests at the expense of nature's intrinsic value. We've highlighted the ethical imperative to consider future generations, stressing the long-term impacts of environmental degradation and the moral responsibility we bear to preserve our natural heritage. The discussion in intrinsic value broadens our perspective, urging us to recognize the worth of non-human entities and the ecosystems they inhabit. Singer's deep ecology framework challenges us to transcend shallow environmental thinking, advocating for the inherent value of all life forms and the preservation of biodiversity. This holistic approach calls for a fundamental shift in how we interact with our planet, moving from exploitation to stewardship. Finally, the development of an environmental ethic emphasizes the need for sustainable practices, corporate responsibility, and a re-evaluation of our materialistic values. It encourages us to seek harmony with nature, fostering a future where both human and environmental well-being are prioritized. And that concludes our discussion about the environment of Peter Singers. We hope this discussion has inspired you to reflect on your role in protecting our environment and to take meaningful action towards a sustainable future. Again, thank you for joining us.